Let's play the role of a prisoner of fate, the leader of the Phantom Thieves, and capable of exploiting the metaverse. Not that metaverse, but more like a mental metaverse. That's right, we're diving into Persona 5 and trying to figure out how to build Joker. And just remember, we're going to be playing this Joker, not this Joker, so sorry to disappoint anybody that might have clicked on this for the name alone. Welcome to D&D Builds, where we have an outlet to make all sorts of ridiculous Dungeons & Dragons builds and stop driving the people in our lives insane with them. Today we're going to skip one of the longest tutorials in all of gaming and dive right in to how to build Joker from Persona 5. While he does pop up in the new Smash Bros, we want to take a deep dive into the character. There's a heavy reliance on the relationships that you're building with other characters, so we're definitely going to have to take that into effect, and we have to deal with the whole mental metaverse mindscape thing as well. And we can't ignore the fact that you're known as the leader of the Phantom Thieves. So we'll figure out a way to incorporate all of these things into one legitimately playable build. And we're not going to waste any time with some insanely long intro, because I already dealt with that when I played Persona 5 myself. So first things first, let's pick a race and a background. We're going to keep it simple here and pick the human variant race, so that way we get a little extra flavor we can play with. And then for a background, we do have a couple of choices. As the main protagonist is a student, we could go with something like Cloistered Scholar, but a huge part of the background is that you're wrongfully accused of assaulting somebody just for trying to do the right thing. You're trying to protect somebody else, so you beat up a real scumbag. So with a wrongful conviction and trying to deal with the probation and after effects of that, we're going to take the criminal background. Criminals get skill proficiencies in deception and stealth, and you get one type of a gaming set and thieves tools. We can alter this a little bit to be sort of a mental thieves tools to break into people's minds, but in general, you're going to need this either way. And the gaming set can be pretty much any console you want it to be, since Persona 5 is available on a few different platforms. Lastly, you also get some equipment like a crowbar, some common clothes, and an extra 15 gold pieces. You get to pick a criminal specialty, but since you were really just trying to defend somebody, I'm going to go with an enforcer specialty. Although you could tweak it a little bit and either go with burglar, since you're invading people's minds, or you could go with blackmailer, since you're finding out all of those terrible secrets and using them to alter some later choices. You get a criminal contact, and I would actually pick Morgana for this. It's one of the only reasons you'd have a random little cat person following you around, and it really gives a purpose to why she's there. And just because I mentioned the skill proficiencies previously, I should also quickly mention that the human variant gives you another skill proficiency of your choice. So we're going to take the one most useful one in most of D&D, and that's perception. Now let's jump into some stats. As far as stats go, Joker is pretty lean, so we're not going to be focusing on overall strength. So we're going to dump strength to 8, then we're going to take dexterity, boost it all the way up to 15, get another +1 from our human variant, take our constitution, put it at 14 so we can actually take a couple hits. We're going to dump intelligence because we frankly don't have a lot to work with here and we need to use the points elsewhere. And then we're going to take our wisdom and round it out to an even 10, just because you're dealing with a lot of mental stuff, and usually your mental defenses deal more with wisdom. So we'll just at least keep it at a baseline of 10. Then, because you're constantly trying to build new relationships, friends, and go on dates constantly, so we're going to take our charisma, boost it up to 15, and then get another +1 from our human variant, making it 16. Now we need to pick a starting class. This game is part Pokemon and part dungeon crawling, thieving type of thing. So we need to bring about both aspects, and we're going to try and do it in order of how the game works. So early on in the game, you run into Igor. He talks about how you have to enter the Velvet Room, which isn't any sort of BDSM thing, it's just kind of this weird dreamscape. And the only way to get there is if you already have a contract. And Igor is there on behalf of Philemon, which I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce it, but maybe I just watched way too much Digimon and that seems right to me. But anyways, dealing with him and how he deals with a higher power and he's been throughout most of the Persona games, it really feels like you're making a deal. And not only that, since Igor's been around so much, it's kind of like making a deal with a great old one. So the very first level I'm going to take is going to be in Warlock. And I touched on this a little bit in my how to build Pokemon in D&D video, but because you wind up stealing so many personas throughout the game, this very much relates to that Pokemon build. But we'll circle back to that in a second. First things first, let's just dive into what you get at level 1 of being a Warlock, and especially going with a great old one. You get proficiencies in light armor and simple weapons, which is going to work out pretty well because your main weapon that you use throughout the game is a dagger, and you don't really wear any big bulky armor, so this is going to work out pretty well. You also get saving throws in wisdom and charisma, and that's going to be helpful since you're diving through a mental landscape. And then finally you get 2 additional skills. I would probably go with intimidation because that's more of a charismatic type of skill that you're going to be using while dealing with these intense personalities. And then I would go with investigation. You could go with arcana, but it seems like Joker is kind of lost a lot of times throughout the game and still trying to figure out how a lot of this stuff works. So he wouldn't really understand the magic behind it. So instead, I would go with investigation, as you're really trying to investigate the minds of these people and figure out what makes them tick. Because the whole point of Persona 5 is that you're dealing with some really scuzzy people, and then you have to infiltrate their minds and alter them to make the appropriate choice that will help most of society as a whole. Because while part of this game is a lot like Pokemon, the whole dungeon crawling through people's minds part is kind of more like Inception. You also get some starting equipment at this first level. You can get a light crossbow or any simple weapon, so we're going to take a dagger as a simple weapon, and then you get an arcane focus. So in the Persona 5 game, you actually get a toy gun, and you can use that inside the metaverse as if it were real. So we're going to treat that as an arcane focus and figure out a way to do some blasting with it. Then you also get a Scholar's Pack or a Dungeoneer's Pack, and that works perfectly because a Scholar's Pack will work since you're a student. And you get some leather armor, any simple weapon, and 2 daggers. So just in case you lose that first simple weapon you get, we just have plenty of daggers to back us up. Then at first level, you also get a patron. And Igor mentions when you first meet him that you've already made a contract and you feel as though you're a prisoner to fate. So in order to try and fight that fate, we're going to rely on this patron's help. And as I mentioned, Igor and Philemon feel as though they are great old ones because they've been around throughout the entire series for the most part. And Great Old One works perfectly because it's all about attacking somebody mentally or dealing with more mind-altering related spells. Once you take that Great Old One as your patron, you get the Awakened Mind. This gives you the ability to touch the minds of other creatures. You can telepathically speak to any creature you can see within 30 feet of you, and you don't even need to share a language with them. This is going to help to replicate the whole entering somebody else's mind thing. At first level, you also get some spell casting, giving you 2 cantrips and 2 spells. We'll circle back to that in just a minute though. At second level, you get some Eldritch Invocations, and we will utilize those pretty well for this overall build once we get to the next level, which is deciding on a Pact boon. You could choose Pact of the Blade to really utilize the whole dagger thing, but we're going to focus more on Pact of the Chain. This gives you access to Find Familiar, which you can cast as a ritual, and it doesn't count against the spells that you know. And when you cast Find Familiar, you can choose new forms for that familiar being a warlock. You can choose an imp, pseudo-dragon, quasit, or a sprite. And all of these have some relatable choices in Persona. So this is how we're going to replicate being able to pick up and utilize personas within the Persona 5 game. You only use them here and there for specialized attacks, and that's pretty much what you want Find Familiar for in this situation. A lot of people choose Imp because they can turn invisible, they can do some great scouting, and that's helpful, but I kind of like going with more of a sprite here. While they do minimal damage, they do have the opportunity to make somebody fall unconscious, and that's just pretty damn helpful, even if it is a lower chance of happening. So now that we've hit level 3 of Warlock, let's talk about what spells and invocations we want to grab here. First things first, we gotta cover the cantrips. You wind up with 2 cantrips at 3rd level, so we're gonna pick up the good old default of Eldritch Blast, which we're gonna use with our toy gun Arcane Focus to replicate the shooting effect that you get when you're fighting and using that toy. That way you can blast away, and you can blast more times as you level up throughout this character. You could try to pick up the cantrip friends, as a big part of the game is making friends with people, but it is a bit of work to actually create a friend. It's not just as simple as casting a cantrip. So you're going to be relying on your actual charisma to do this. So we're going to avoid that and go instead with the cantrip Mind Sliver. This is one of the few cantrips that deals psychic damage, and it's versus an intelligence save, which is definitely one of the least utilized attributes in D&D, unless you're a wizard or evoker or something. So that's going to be super helpful. And along with dealing some psychic damage if they fail, they also subtract a 1d4 from their next saving throw before the end of your next turn. So you could cycle through Mind Slivers if you really wanted, and they have less of a chance of passing your next one. And you know 4 spells at this level, with 2 spell slots that refill on a short rest, and the spell slots are level 2. So the very first spell I would take is Dissonant Whispers. You get access to this spell by having a Great Old One as a patron, and it pretty much just causes a bunch of psychic damage and then forces somebody to run away if they fail on their save. You could also take something like Unseen Servant at this level to try and replicate Morgana, but you already have that sort of criminal contact thing, so we won't really worry about that. There are some other options like Cause Fear or Charm Person, but like I said, we want to use our charisma to actually take our time charming people, so we'll avoid that. And Cause Fear is okay, but I really want to utilize these spells, so I'm going to focus on utilizing these spells we get at the level 2 spell slot range. So with 3 spells left over to choose from, we're going to rely on that Great Old One again and take Phantasmal Force. This is all about creating something in someone's mind that they believe is real, and they believe it so much that their mind will try to rationalize absolutely anything to do with it. So it even states in the spell that if you convince somebody that there's a bridge and they fall off of that bridge because it's not actually there, then mentally they just assume that they slipped or got pushed off or whatever, and they will go ahead and try and walk across that bridge all over again if they survive the first fall. So this is a fun one to play around with, especially if you can get a little creative with what you're trying to implant into somebody's mind. And then the other 2 spells I would grab are Mind Spike, because this is definitely a solid choice for more mental related spells, and then Shadow Blade. Shadow Blade is pretty cool because it's all about dealing psychic damage with a blade. And you're not really using a knife in the real world, you're only using it in the metaverse most of the time in the game. So with that in mind, you can use this knife in creative ways while you're traversing the metaverse, and it deals 2d8 psychic damage. It has the finesse, light, and thrown properties. So it's better than a normal dagger in almost every way. Not to mention, if you throw it, you can actually use a bonus action to resummon it back to your hand. Then diving into the invocations, we're going to grab good old faithful Agonizing Blast because it helps boost the damage from your Eldritch Blast. And then we want to lean on the whole Gathering Personas thing and get something that you can only get when you have the Pact of the Chain. We're going to grab Investment of the Chain Master. This boosts your familiar that you gain from casting that fine familiar, giving it some flying or swimming speed if you want to, and you can command it to attack as a bonus action, which you had the ability to make it attack before because the Pact of the Chain already does that, but now you can do it as a bonus action and really utilize that bonus action as much as possible. Also, this makes the familiar's attacks magical, so that way it can overcome any resistances. If there's ever a DC that's required from a familiar's ability or anything like that, it can actually use your DC instead, which is usually much better. And then if a familiar takes any damage, you can use your reaction to grant it resistance to that damage. This is okay, but it's not amazing because it's going to be helpful at really early levels, but most familiars have very, very little health. So once you get into higher level enemies, that part is pretty much useless. But we still want to make sure we can use a familiar with all the personas. So either way, we want to capitalize on this as much as possible. Now that we've hit level 3 in Warlock, we're actually going to jump out of Warlock and focus more on the whole Phantom Thief thing. So we're going to jump into a multi-class and grab our first level of Rogue. Multiclassing in this way does grant you one additional skill from the Rogue skill list, as well as light armor and thieves tools, but you already have those. Now I will say that if you really wanted to optimize this build, you could kind of swap the order of these, because rogues do get more skills and they get dexterity saving throws, and dexterity saving throws are far more useful, and you'd have at least one more skill to play around with. So if you are a bit of an optimization junkie, that's what I would recommend. Just wanted to throw that out there. But I'm trying to go more accurate to what pops up in the game, so we're going to try and go through this more in order. So the skill we're going to pick up here is Persuasion. You need it for all of the social interactions that you're going to be doing throughout the games, and it's just so damn helpful. At level 1 of Rogue, you also get Expertise, which allows you to double your proficiency in 2 skills that you are proficient in. You can use your thieves tools to be especially proficient in them, but we're going to focus on the actual skills instead. Since so much of it is revolved around making friends, I would highly recommend getting Expertise in Persuasion, and then to really help with sneaking around these mental dungeons, I would grab Expertise in Stealth. It is beyond helpful, so I would highly recommend those two. Also at first level, you get Sneak Attack, which is going to be the bread and butter of pretty much every rogue. It gives you some additional damage to roll, as long as your enemy has another enemy within 5 feet of them, or if you have advantage against that enemy, and you also have to be using either a finesse or ranged weapon. And this is going to be pretty key because we have a familiar that can always be next to our enemies as well, so you're pretty much always guaranteed sneak attack as long as you don't have disadvantage on the attack. Lastly, you get Thieves' Cant, and this is just a better way of talking to your buddies in code. At second level of Rogue, you get Cunning Action, and this is just another way to use your bonus action for a lot of helpful things like dashing, disengaging, or hiding. Then at third level, your sneak attack damage gets upgraded from a 1d6 to a 2d6, and you get to pick a roguish archetype. You have 3 big choices here when it comes to an archetype. Igor regularly refers to you as Trickster, so you could take the Arcane Trickster, but outside of him calling you that name, it doesn't really work very well either way. Another choice is Mastermind, but that's more of just a play on words than anything, so we will completely ignore that one. Then we have the Phantom, and since you are the leader of the Phantom Thieves, this was super tempting, but this archetype more relies on phantoms in the sense of ghosts, and it's all about being one with death and stuff, and that's not really what we're aiming for. Instead, we're going to go with Soul Knife. Soul Knife is more about infiltrating somebody's mind and attacking them mentally, and that is way too spot on to remotely ignore. So we're going to be taking Soul Knife at level 3 for our roguish archetype. This gives you psionic power, which gives you some psionic energy die, which you can use to boost your skills a little bit if you fail on a skill check, or when you're trying to use any sort of tools like your thieves tools, or it gives you the ability to telepathically communicate between yourself and others, but you already have that ability from your Great Old One stuff. So psionic power in general doesn't help you that much at this level, but you also get Psychic Blades. So Psychic Blades allow you to summon shimmering blades of psychic energy, and then when you attack, you can actually do psychic damage instead of physical damage. This is very similar to using your Shadow Blade spell, but it won't cost you one of your very valuable spell slots. Not to mention, it's not going to require concentration, and Shadow Blade, you can only concentrate on it up to a minute, so it does have a very limited use. So even though it does a little less damage, dealing only 1d6 plus your ability modifier instead of the 2d8 that Shadow Blade has, you're going to be relying on this as your backup pretty often. Not to mention, you can also follow up your initial attack with another attack as a bonus action, although it deals a 1d4 instead of a 1d6 on the hit, but it's still super helpful because it gives you another chance to utilize your sneak attack if your first attack misses. Then at 4th level, you get to increase an ability score, so we're going to bump up our dexterity. And then at 5th level, you get Uncanny Dodge, and your sneak attack is increased to 3d6. Uncanny Dodge is going to be super helpful to mitigate some damage. Then at 6th level, you get Expertise and 2 more skills, so I would just boost up my Deception and my Perception, because both of those are just super useful, especially when you're trying to keep your identity hidden as Joker, or you're trying to make sure you keep your wits about you as you're roaming around the mental landscapes of the metaverse. Then at 7th level of Rogue, you get one more sneak attack die, and you get evasion. Evasion's super helpful, especially when it comes to dodging things like fire breath from a dragon. This makes it so when you make a dexterity saving throw, if you fail, you only take half damage, and if you pass, you take no damage at all. Then at 8th level, you get another ability score improvement, so we're going to max out our dexterity to 20. And then at 9th level, you get another feature from your soul knife archetype. You get soul blades. This allows you to use your psionic energy die to make it so an attack with your psychic blades that miss can suddenly get a little boost. You roll your psionic energy die and you can add that to the attack roll, and hopefully at that point it will hit. Or you can use psychic teleportation. This is just fun to play around with because it allows you to manifest one of your psychic blades as a bonus action, and then you can throw that blade and you can teleport to wherever it landed. As soon as you teleport, the blade vanishes. Even though this is a little more Final Fantasy 15, I think it's still super fun to play around with. Also at this level, just can't forget, you boost up your sneak attack damage a little more. Then at 10th level, you get another ability score improvement because rogues get more ability score improvements than most other classes. So we're gonna boost up our charisma to 18, and that's gonna help all of our warlock stuff. Then at 11th level of rogue, we get reliable talent. And this is so insanely powerful because anything that you have proficiency in as far as a skill, you now can't roll less than a 10. So even if you crit fail, you just treat it as a 10. It's just that simple. So things you have expertise in, like stealth for example, even if you completely botched your die roll, you now automatically get a 10 on the dice. Then at this level, you get to double your proficiency, making it 20, and your dexterity is also maxed out. So that means you can't roll less than a 25 in stealth. I feel like people don't talk enough about how insanely awesome this ability is. Being that good at every skill that you have proficiency in is so damn powerful. And also, not to be overshadowed too much, you get another 1d6 to your sneak attack die. Then at 12th level of rogue, you get another ability score improvement, so we're gonna max out our charisma at 20. And at this 12th level of rogue, you're also hitting 15th level overall. And you may have noticed that I never said what we were gonna use our human variant feat for. So Tasha's Cauldron of Everything included a feat called Eldritch Adept. This allows you to learn one additional invocation. So we're gonna actually utilize this here. Although you can replace this invocation at any time you level up. So you can take whatever you want to start, but at level 15 overall, I would swap whatever Eldritch invocation you chose earlier on to become Chains of Carcery. You can only take this at 15th level, and you're required to have taken Pact of the Chain, but this allows you to cast Hold Monster at will. Granted, you can only target a Celestial, Fiend, or Elemental, but it's still insanely useful, because this pretty much fills out the majority of what you go up against as far as personas. And this will come in handy so much in tons and tons of campaigns. Granted, you can't use it against the same creature more than once without taking a long rest, but it's rare that you would want to try and utilize this more than once against a single target anyways, because other than that one specific scenario, you get to cast it at will. So now back to the rogue levels. At 13th level of rogue, you get one additional sneak attack die, and from your soul knife archetype, you get Psychic Veil. You can weave the veil of psychic static to mask yourself. This can magically make you invisible for up to 1 hour, although it does disappear the second you deal any damage, or if you are forced by any creature to make a saving throw, but it can still be pretty damn useful as you're sneaking around the metaverse. And I just like the wording of it because it's talking about masking yourself, and that's kind of a whole thing with the Persona games. Then at 14th level of rogue, you get Blind Sense, meaning that anybody that's invisible to you, you can actually still know they're there, and you don't count as blinded to them, so that's pretty damn helpful when it comes to dealing with enemies that are hidden. Although it only works on creatures within 10 feet of you, it's still pretty damn helpful. Then at 15th level of rogue, you get to boost up your sneak attack damage, one more dice, up to an 8d6.
Grab his dick and twist it!
Oh my god, dude, this is an MMA fight, dude.
You
Too much.
twist that dick!
Twist his dick!
Twist his dick!
Oh my god, dude. Oh my god.
Oh, dick twist!
And you get Slippery Mind. This grants you proficiency in wisdom saving throws, and this is pretty useless when it comes to us because we already have that from starting off as Warlock. But like I said, if we were going to optimize this and not try to go more according to how the storyline plays out, it would be better to start with Rogue and then multi-class into a Warlock than it would be the other way around. So if you're going to be playing this, I highly recommend just taking one level of Rogue to start, then doing the whole Warlock stuff, and then jumping back over to Rogue. Then at 16th level, you get another ability score improvement. So what we could do here is get a little more constitution, so we have a little more health, and that's pretty helpful. But what I actually would like to do is really utilize that reliable talent. So I would pick up Skilled. This gives you proficiency in 3 more skills of your choice. And with reliable talent, you can't roll less than a 10 on any of those skills, so you are a pretty impressive skill monkey. So we have some great choices here, and with 3 skills to choose from, I'm going to start off with acrobatics. You can utilize your maxed out dexterity here, and you can use this skill against anybody trying to grapple you. You're not going to be doing a lot of grappling yourself, but if anybody tries to grapple you, it can be pretty dangerous. So acrobatics is used defensively in this scenario, and with having reliable talent, that means you can't get less than a 21 on your acrobatics check. So somebody's got to get better than a 21 just to grapple you, and that's a pretty solid choice to go with. Then as far as my other 2 skills, I would grab Insight, so that way you can better understand the minds that you're invading, and Sleight of Hand. Sleight of Hand is just good for most rogues because they tend to utilize this when trying to steal items. Then at 17th level of Rogue and last level of this overall build, you get 1 more d6 to your sneak attack damage, and you get the capstone ability of Soul Knife, Rend Mind. This ability causes anybody that's received damage from your psychic blades and sneak attack to be forced to make a wisdom saving throw. They have to pass a DC 19 at this level, and if they fail, they're stunned for 1 minute. They can still repeat the save at the end of each of their turns, but that still leaves a pretty massive opening for a lot of your pals to chime in and do some serious damage. This ability only resets on a long rest, but you can also expend 3 of your psionic energy dice to use it again. So it's fairly similar to going with a stunning strike from a monk, but it is slightly more costly. However, since it does last a full minute as long as they continue to fail those saving throws, it can be way more useful overall, especially with all of the other tricks up your sleeve. And that's fully gonna round out our overall Joker from Persona 5 build. And just to give a quick little idea of how to play this build pretty well, out of combat you have tons of skills you can use, which you are almost guaranteed not to fail with your reliable talent and expertise and all of the extra skills you have from the skilled feat. And then once you're in combat, you can utilize your Pact of the Chain to use your familiar to make sure you always have sneak attack, and that familiar can also use the help action, which will grant you advantage on your main attack, which you always get as a rogue. You always want to focus on that big main attack. And if you just happen to miss on that advantaged attack, you still have a backup to be able to use your bonus action for a slightly less damaging attack, but only by 2 points on a die. Then after you hit super hard with your sneak attack damage dealing psychic damage, you can activate your Soul Knife's capstone ability and hopefully stun your enemy for a full minute, allowing your entire team to just pile on and do that crazy animation that happens in the Persona 5 game. I just wanted to give a quick layout of how it might work because I'm really kind of excited to try out this build. This build was recommended by Butter Bacon Gamer, so I gotta give him a shout out and a quick thank you for recommending it. It was a lot of fun to build him out, but I was having a lot of trouble deciding which build that's been recommended to do next, because there's been so many good recommendations in the comments and I've been really excited about a lot of them. So I left it up to these super kick-ass people to help me decide. I left it up to them to vote on who would be next on D&D builds, and they chose Joker. If you want to help vote on what to choose next, or if you want access to the character sheets to any of my builds, as well as a handful of other perks, or if you just want to be as freaking awesome as these people. Feel free to check out the link to my Patreon in the description down below. But don't let that discourage you if you have any build that you want in the future. I still read through as many of my comments as possible, and they help guide what build I should do next. And even if you just have some comments about this build, what you would do differently, any mistakes I made, feel free to correct me, tear me a new one, or do whatever you want in the comments down below. I try and read as many of them as possible. Finally, if you got the end of this video, let me know by hitting that like button. I was super happy to make it, and I was just happy to be able to play around with some of the kick-ass soundtrack that Persona 5 has. Thanks for making it all the way here, and just for making it all the way through the metaverse to get here. I'll be hoping you make at least 3 nat 20s on your next D&D session, especially if you use this build to become a member of the Phantom Thieves and play as Joker from Persona 5.